द वे फॉरवर्ड इज ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਕੁਈਨਸ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਅਟਾਰਨੀ ਦੀ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜੂਨ 25 ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਾਇਮਰੀਜ਼ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹਨ ਦ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੈਟਿਕ ਪ੍ਰਾਇਮਰੀਜ਼। ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹਨ ਉਸ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ Hon'Ble Judge Gregory Lasak. We welcome you, Judge.
Thank you, Harjot.
It's our honor to have you here today. Judge, can you first of all please tell us what's the role of a DA in our criminal justice system?
The district attorney is the chief law enforcement official of the county. The district attorney prosecutes the cases that the police bring in when they arrest people, and the district attorney has the power and authority to initiate his own investigations through his own detectives and present cases to the grand jury.
So does the district attorney have any discretionary powers in exercise of all this?
Yes, he can decide not to prosecute a case, he can decide to prosecute a case, and he'll decide what the disposition should be at the end of the case. And he'll decide what punishment he should recommend to the judge.
So that's a very important role. ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝੀਏ ਕਿ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਅਟਾਰਨੀ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਫਿਸ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਹੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆਫਿਸ ਹੈ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਥੇ US ਵਿੱਚ ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇਹ ਜਾਣਨਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟਸ ਇਸ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਰਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਪਏ ਸੋ ਦੈਟ ਵੀ ਮੇਕ ਐਨ ਇਨਫੋਰਮਡ ਚੋਇਸ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। Judge, tell us something about yourself. Were you born and raised in Queens?
I was raised in Woodside, Queens, the Woodside section. I lived the first 30 years of my life there. I attended the local grammar school, St. Sebastian's, went to Holy Cross High School, Queens College in Flushing, and New York Law School.
All right.
My wife also grew up in Woodside, my wife Patty. And we got married and we moved to Richmond Hill.
Still in Queens?
Still in Queens. We moved about 5 miles away from Woodside. We raised our 3 children in Richmond Hill. And we've lived in Richmond Hill since 1986.
You're still a resident of Richmond Hill?
Always will be.
Good to know, Judge.
Always
Good to
will
know.
be.
Judge, we will speak a little about your experience which has made the Queen's Bar call you a well-qualified candidate, and you might be the most qualified candidate for this position. Judge, will you tell us which year did you become an assistant district attorney?
In March 1978, right after I graduated law school.
And that was with the Queen's District Attorney Office?
Queen's District Attorney.
And how long were you a district attorney for?
25 years.
25 years.
I served the people of Queens for 25 years.
And you were named as head of the homicide division. Which year was that?
That was when I was 30 years old. That would be 1984, January of 84.
Can you tell us something about that experience?
Well, I worked my way up through the ranks, and the ultimate position to me is to try murder cases. And I started trying murder cases, and I had good results. And at the time, there was an opening for the chief of the Homicide Bureau, and the district attorney, Mr. Santucci, offered me the job, and I was made the chief of the Homicide Bureau in the early part of 1984. I was in charge of the investigation and prosecution of all the murder cases in Queens. And over the years, I was probably in charge of the investigation of over 2,500 murder cases.
And for how long did you head that division?
Well, when Judge Brown came in June of 1991, after he was in for a period of time, he created a major crimes division, which had 2 homicide bureaus in it, a special victims bureau, a career criminal bureau, major case bureau, and I was in charge of that whole division. I was made the executive assistant district attorney.
Judge, there is a famous case that you have been associated with. That's a 1985 stun gun case. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, that was in the 106th precinct in Ozone Park. Back in April of 1985, unbeknownst to us, there was a street narcotics unit in that precinct, and some of the officers were using a stun gun, a term I had never heard before, that case. And I was notified by a defense attorney that when he met his client in the arraignment part, that's where you go to see a judge for the first time after arrest, he had burn marks all over his body. So I started in the investigation, and we were able to present the evidence to the grand jury, and 5 police officers were indicted, a sergeant and a lieutenant included. It was one of the major scandals in the history of the New York City Police Department, one of the major scandals. Based on that happening, the head of the precinct had to retire, the borough commander of all of Queens had to retire, the chief of patrol for the entire city of New York had to retire, and I was in charge of that case.
So you have a history of standing up for the citizen.
That's correct. It wasn't easy, especially back then, to go against the New York City Police Department, but that's the duty of the district attorney, protect the citizens, not only from the criminals, but any abuse of authority from law enforcement.
We appreciate that, Judge. And in 1986, I guess you were involved in prosecution of the people who murdered police officer John Scarangella. Is that right?
That's correct. John Scarangella. He was in a patrol car, a marked New York City patrol car, with his partner, Richard Rainey, and they were in the St. Albans section of the 113th precinct, and there was a report of a white van that was being used for burglaries. They spotted a white van, and they followed it for a couple blocks, and they pulled it over. Before they could get out of their police car, before they could even unholster their guns, 2 men came out of that van, a driver and a passenger, and they fired 25 bullets into that police car. And John Scarangella was hit 3 times in the head. Richard Officer Rainey was shot 8 times, but he survived. Officer Scarangella passed away about 2 weeks later. There was a manhunt, a nationwide manhunt to find these men, and they arrested one of them in Sumter, South Carolina in the summertime of that year, and they arrested the second one in January in the city of Philadelphia.
And those men were brought to justice.
Yes, the case was tried 3 times. First time, there was a hung jury, 10-2 for conviction. The second time, there was a hung jury, 8-4 for acquittal. And then I was assigned to the case, and we tried the case and got a conviction in front of a jury. In fact, today's June 6th.
Yes.
Yes, June 6th.
Today was the day?
1986. Today was the day the jury came back and convicted him.
That's good to know, Judge. And when did you take over the Major Crimes Division?
That was after Judge Brown was in the office for about a year. He came in 91, so it was like the end of 92.
End of 92?
Yes.
And when did you take the bench?
I was elected November of 2003. January 1st, 2004, I took the bench as a Supreme Court judge.
And how long did that stint last?
Supreme Court term is 14 years. So I served my 14-year term. I ran for re-election in 2017. I was re-elected, and 9 months into my term, in September of last year, 2018, I resigned after I had a conversation with Judge Brown, a personal conversation, and it became apparent that he was not going to run again for re-election. So you cannot run for office from the bench. So I had to resign my judgeship. I gave up a job that was paying me a lot of money, basically the same as the district attorney. I gave that up because the district attorney's job is too important. Too important for a politician to have or too important for someone with no experience to have.
Can you tell us something about some of the cases that have stayed with you during that time?
Well, my time as a judge,
Yes, sir.
about 3 years ago, I tried the defendant who was indicted for murdering police officer Brian Moore in the 105th Precinct. And he was convicted in front of me of murder in the first degree by the jury, and I sentenced him to life without parole. Another one was, there was a imam who was walking on Liberty Avenue and 79th Street in Ozone Park, Liberty Avenue, 79th Street, and with his assistant, and they were both murdered by a lone gunman who came out of the crowd and just killed the both of them in the street. That person was indicted, Oscar Morell, I think his name was. He was indicted, he was tried in front of me, and he was convicted by the jury, and I sentenced him to life without parole.
So we see that Judge Lasak has experience both defending the rule of law and defending the innocent citizens who might be victims of police or the system abuse. Famed defense attorney Barry Scheck called him a true minister of justice. Your Honor, can you again tell us what are the reasons that you're running for this office now?
As I just said, this office is too important. It's too important to the people of the county for somebody who has no experience or somebody who's just a career politician who needs a job because they're term limited out of their present job. Two of my opponents are term limited out of their present job. They're good people. They're nice people. They do a good job in their political office, but the district attorney's office requires a special skill set because there are 325 lawyers working there.
Judge, we'll take a short break at this stage. We'll come back. Keep watching The Way Forward. ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੱਜ ਗ੍ਰੈਗਰੀ ਲੇਸੈਕ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਕੁਈਨਸ ਡਿਸਟ੍ਰਿਕਟ ਅਟਾਰਨੀ ਆਫਿਸਰਸ ਤੇ ਜੱਜ I would like to ask you, what do you see the role of a district attorney being? I ask you in the context that we have seen varying policy ideas, ideologies. There are some candidates who have been talking about decarceral and restorative justice. So what do you think should be the role, and how do you see these new ideas?
The main role of the district attorney is to keep the people, all 2.3 million people of Queens County, safe. Got to keep them safe. They want to be safe in their homes. They want their children to be safe when they're going back and forth to school or going wherever they go. And they want to be safe. They want to feel safe. That's the main role to me. Now, the system needs reform. It does. A lot of times, young people get caught up in the system with a small amount of marijuana or doing something stupid, breaking somebody's window. Those kind of cases should be either deferred to programs, give a program instead of going to prison, or decline to prosecute them with a program. Because once you saddle a young person with a criminal record, it affects the rest of their life. It'll prevent them from getting into a good school, getting a good job, getting into a good union. So there is need for reform. The best person to reform the system is someone who knows the system, who has relationships with all the partners in the system. A DA can't go in there on day one and say, I'm going to change this or this, because you got to have partners with the police department and the other police units, like the Port Authority Police, that deal with the DA's office. You got to have a relationship with the judiciary, the judges. I resigned as the deputy administrative judge. I was the number 2 judge in Queens County. So all of those people are my former colleagues. When I left the DA's office, I was the number 3 person in that office. A lot of those people are still there. They know me, they respect me. So those relationships are so important to make change, because to make change, all those other partners in the criminal justice system have to go along with the change that you want. Someone comes in there has never worked in that area, they're not going to be able to change anything. Especially people that have been attacking the system during this campaign. Now, the other partners are not going to cooperate with them.
When you say change, do you think we need to go as far as a decarceral and restorative justice, or?
No. You have to look at this in 2 sections. Number 1, violent crimes, violent criminals. Your murderers, rapists, and robbers. You got to take a hard line on them. With exceptions. Sometimes there's aberrational behavior on one night or one day. So you can always, everything is a case-by-case basis. But violent criminals should not be allowed in our society because they tend to commit crimes again. They repeat repeat offenders. And as the DA, you have a duty to keep the 2.3 million safe from people who may be on a road to harm them.
Judge, I would ask you in this context, some people have been alleging that you have been very hard, you have taken a very hard view of this thing. Some people have called you mass incarcerator, or even we recently heard the word Mr. Murder. Can you tell us something which proves this wrong? And I particularly speak about your record. We know what you have done with the wrong man cases. Can you tell us something about that?
Right. That Mr. Murder title came when I left the DA's office. The New York Times did a feature story on me on page 1 of the city section. And the title of the article was Mr. Murder. I had never heard that term referred to me in my life. I don't know where they got that from. Okay, and some people kid me about that afterwards. That's where that name came from. I have dealt mainly with murder cases for the last 39 years, both as a DA, chief of homicide, and executive assistant, major crimes, and as the judge in the homicide part. Each courtroom is called a part. I was in the homicide part. So most of my career, I've been dealing with murder cases and other violent criminals. That's where I probably got a reputation. But when I became a Supreme Court judge, normally having worked in the DA's office for 25 years, I would be sent to the Bronx or sent to Brooklyn or would sit in the criminal term in Jamaica, in the civil term, I'm sorry, in Jamaica, because of 25 years with the DA's office, and the DA's office are the ones who come into the courtrooms to prosecute the crimes. The judge, the administrative judge, Judge Fisher at the time, he spoke to the defense bar, he talked to the prominent lawyers in Queens and the defense bar, and they all agreed that I could stay in the criminal term. That was my reputation. Firm, but fair. So the defense lawyers who would be trying the cases in front of me said, no, we trust Greg. You know, let him stay in the criminal term. So Judge Fisher put me in the drug treatment part, where we work to help people have the addiction to drugs. It's a disease. And, you know, like I said, I mostly dealt with murderers, rapists, and robbers. This was something new for me. And it was a great experience. And every one of those people that we saved, we had to have a lot of patience because they would fall. You have to get them up. They would fall again when you have the addiction. And everyone that we saved that survived and completed the program was a success story.
But Judge, can you tell us something about those 20 cases that you re-investigated?
Okay. Back in the 90s, I started getting calls from attorneys or visits from attorneys or even letters from inmates of people upstate in prison, claims of innocence. And I always would entertain them. But there was only like one or two earlier in my career. At this particular point in time, there was a lot of them. And I reinvestigated everyone, I entertained everyone that came in front of me.
And these people already incarcerated.
Yes. They were either arrested, indicted, or convicted, sitting in jail. One of them was sitting in jail for 6 years on a sentence of 8 1/3 to 25 for a rape that occurred in Woodside on 69th Street, right off the 7 train. And there was a man who was in New York only to take care of his sick uncle. He's from Alabama. I call him a gentle giant, a big, soft-spoken man. He was eating an ice cream cone. He had just gotten off the train, came from Brooklyn. His girlfriend had made him dinner. It was his birthday that day. He's walking, eating an ice cream cone, going down the street, and the police officers thought he fit the description of the person who attacked the woman a few minutes before that. So they brought him back to the ambulance, and he went willingly because he had nothing to hide, and she identified him. Based on a description, you could have picked up any man of color that would have been fitting that description. She identified him. He was indicted, went to trial in front of a jury. They convicted him, was sentenced to 8 1/3 to 25 years, was sitting in prison 6 years. I was able to prove that at the time she was attacked, this man had just gotten on a J train in Brooklyn at Halsey Street and was making his way back to Queens to take care of his sick uncle. Hence, when the police saw him, he was eating an ice cream cone. I did that 20 times. 20 times. So this reputation that you referred to, this belies that reputation, because in order to do that, I had to go against a decision by a detective that arrested this man, an assistant DA who wrote up the case, a grand jury that indicted him, Supreme Court judge that said the indictment was good, and a jury that convicted him, and the appellate division that said there was no problem with that conviction. I had to go all of those decisions.
And most of these men were men of color.
They were all men of color.
They were all men of color. ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੱਜ ਲੇਸੈਕ ਦੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਟਲੀਸਟ 20 ਕੇਸਿਸ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਨਵਿਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੋਈ ਦੀ ਸਨ, ਲੋਕ ਜੇਲ੍ਹ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਉਨ ਕੇਸਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਰੀਓਪਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਔਰ ਉਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੇਕਸੂਰ ਲੋਕ ਸਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਛੁਡਵਾਇਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਕਰਵਾਇਆ। ਅਸੀਂ ਜੱਜ, so in your own words, what differentiates you from other candidates in this race? Your experience?
What you just said, my experience not only as a prosecutor, as a trial lawyer, as a chief of homicide, as an executive assistant. I had at any time between 60 and almost 100 lawyers working for me in the DA's office. There are 330 lawyers approximately working in the DA's office at any time. And my experience reinvestigating these cases, it's so important. When I go back into that office, I want to set the proper tone. Sometimes DAs do not accept the fact that there's a wrong man there. They can't accept that fact. You have to have an open mind. Everyone the police bring into your office is not guilty. You got to be able to differentiate.
Judge, we don't have any Punjabi speaking ADAs in the DA's office. Is that something you want to look into?
The beauty of Queens County is I never have to get on an airplane to see the world, because the entire world is in Queens County. We're the most diverse county in the universe. All right? Yes, we should have, and I will make sure we have a Punjabi-speaking assistant DA. I want the victims of crimes, and that's what being a DA is all about, the victims of crime to be able to come in, and witnesses to come in and feel comfortable when they see assistant DAs that look like them. we're the most diverse county.
Yes, Your Honor. Judge, our particular community faces issues of hate crime. There have been issues of racism, bullying. Is that something you have a plan for?
Yes, I do. I plan to hire 18 community assistant DAs, one from each of the assembly districts. And that particular ADA is going to have a relationship with the community leaders, the civic leaders, the political leaders, the religious leaders, and the police department in that particular assembly district. So when there's a problem, like these hate crimes that are coming up against certain groups of people, we'll go right in there, bring in that assistant, find out who the leaders are. We'll sit down and try to resolve the situation, educate the young kids, because it's mostly young kids that are doing this, with few exceptions, and they should know you can't do that. Can't do that. And if there is a prosecutable crime, they'll be prosecuted. They'll be prosecuted.
ਇਹ ਸਨ ਜੱਜ ਲੇਸੈਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬੜੀ ਕਲੋਜ਼ਲੀ ਸੁਣੀਆਂ ਔਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਮੇਕ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਔਰ ਜੂਨ 25 ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੋਟ ਕਰੋਗੇ for the election of Queen's District Attorney. Thank you very much, Judge. We thank you for coming here today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. The way forward is ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਲਾਸਟ ਵੀਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਇੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਨਾਲ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਆਈਜੇ ਸਿੰਘ ਐਜ਼ ਪਪੂਲਰਲੀ ਨੋਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਲਾਸਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਆਈਡੈਂਟੀਟੀ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ 2016 ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਸੀਗੇ ਬੌਬੀ ਜਿੰਦਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹੀ ਮੇਡ ਅ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਦੈਟ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਸਟਾਪ ਬੀਇੰਗ hyphenated Americans. ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ that you have to stop being Indian American or something else, you just have to be American. ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਬਾਕੀ ਅਗਰ ਕੋਈ ਗੋਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ and they have adopted the culture completely and have become complete Americans, do we still need to maintain that identity? What do you think, Dr.
Well, to really delve into this, we have to play with the idea of a community and culture and identity and politics. You got to bring them together.
Ji.
Now, sociologists tell us, I think I forget the guy's name now, which is probably 1903 or 1904, around that time. A leading sociologist, he said that religions are the glue of a community. Why do we need a community? Look at an individual, the human being. The human being at birth cannot survive alone, not for a moment, forget a day.
Ji.
And as a matter of fact, if you look at it in life, a human cannot survive alone, although there are experiments that people do, people who leave the world and go live on the mountaintop, but those are exceptions. And I would say they're not normal parts of normal societies.
Ji.
Normal societies do not go without that glue which unites them, brings them together. Because what we do depends on the community acting together. The religions then are the glue for it that helps unite them. And of course, sometimes the glue sets to the consistency of crazy glue. And then it's not very good for the people. And of course, what is community seen by? The practices. Practices become traditions. When do they become traditions? When they work well. Practices that work well become traditions, much like for you as a lawyer, your president takes
So Doctor, the
Okay?
question is,
No, let me
yes,
bring you
yes,
to
yes.
a little modern time.
Sure.
So the community becomes that. And then, of course, good neighbors need good fences. Good fences make good neighbors. That's the typical American saying. And there's some privacy that's necessary. Individual privacy, and then community privacy. And there's privacy that stems from the fact that there are differences in culture, in language, in where you come from, in the cuisine that you eat, in the habits that you have, the habits that have formed you.
Ji.
And the group in a community have the same bloody habits.
Ji.
And those are our traditions. And traditions then become sacred.
Ji. Ji.
They become sacred and they define the religion. If you are ready to kill for that or die for the tradition, you don't know the history. You don't know when it was formed. You don't know what was the reason for it. But this is the way it has been. We've done it for 1,000 years. And I'll pretty well kill you if you don't let me do what I want to do.
Ji.
And that becomes logic. That's not logic. Now, if we can keep the fences between neighbors, good fences where communication can occur, in other words, communities which can live together, religions that can live together peacefully. And I can give you lines from Gurbani that tell us to do exactly that. Then we have a nice living, a community that lives together, progressive society. When that crazy glue comes to separate us, then you do not have a healthy society. And that's what we become because our survival depends on it. Ultimately, it's a game of survival.
Doctor, my question in context of immigrant societies, that societies that go to different places and, we make a deliberate effort to maintain those identities, those cultures, take it with us. My question to you is, so you said that these traditions, they evolve with time, they have different influences.
Of course.
Are we supposed to be burdened by those traditions, or we adopt the new ones as they happen? Let's say, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੜੀ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕਲਚਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਮੇਨਟੇਨ ਰੱਖੀਏ, ਮਗਰ ਅਗਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ, ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੱਸੇਗਾ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਸਿਥੀਅਨ ਟ੍ਰਾਈਬ ਤੋਂ ਆਈ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ ਨਾਰਥ ਪੋਲ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ, ਕੋਈ ਮਿਡਲ ਈਸਟ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦੀ. They stopped somewhere and started a new tradition. They're defending Punjabi tradition, not the tradition from the North Pole. So how much do we carry forward? What do we leave behind? Do we start fresh here? How do you look at that?
You got a series of problems in that statement. One, of course, is when the immigrant comes here, his body comes here, his mind is still partially there.
Okay.
A person in a society and a society itself whole, what do? You create for yourself a safe space, a space, protective space to be safe. So for your mind, what is it? Where you were raised, the way you were raised. The comfort zone is how you were raised. That's what you want to create here. That's you want to recreate. So you want to create institutions and space which capture the sights, sounds, smells of home. Because outside it's different, it's threatening, it's strange. The difference between the stranger and I.
So what about the kids who are born here?
But that's the struggle. But you see, again, as I said, I think, or I will say that now, I tell people that, if you look at a wedding ceremony, no matter what religion you're from, no matter which one, Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever. How long does it take to get wedded? Really, it's a 15-minute ceremony. 15, 20 minutes, you're done. We don't do that. Why? If you want to create, to convert that, transform that wedding into a marriage where there's a merger of people and ideas and outlooks to create a whole greater than the sum of the parts. How long does that take? A lifetime, if you're lucky, or more if you're not. Right? And that's true. And so we are in a conflict, in conflict zone. The immigrant comes, he is in a conflict. He is abandoned his comfort zone. He's got to create his own. So the institutions that he makes sure that it will capture what he remembers as how he was raised. His little kids are not being raised in that, they are being raised in a different environment. It's like when you create fusion meals. I'm reminded of the fact that Punjabi food is the al roti. Where do you think the roti came from? India? Much of India doesn't eat rotis or naans. They came to us from the Middle East. Because every invader that came into India until the British and the French came by sea, they came through the Khyber Pass into Punjab. So Punjab is a state that became a hybrid state. The early Greeks, the nomads, the Mughals, the Mongols, anybody you can think of. That means our DNA is richer for it. Our language is richer for it. Punjabi. What is Punjabi? Sure, it has elements of Sanskrit in it because Sanskrit was there for the larger community. Sure. But look at Punjabi. It has elements of pure Arabic. It has elements of pure Persian, Farsi. I think the Guru Granth has probably more than 8 languages in it. And Punjabi has that. Our culture is that. I can in India travel a couple hundred miles, end up in a place where nobody is seen a Punjabi, cannot speak in Punjabi, know nothing of Punjabi culture. If Guru Nanak traveled all over the known world of his time, north to Tibet and west to Makkah and that area and east, Assam and so on, he traveled all. Why? If his message was only to be for Punjab, why would he travel all that place? Why would he go there? Why would he include references to Islam and Hinduism in there?
डॉक्टर साहब ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਲਾਂਗੇ, ਗੱਲ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ। ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਨਫਲਿਕਟ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੇ ਫਸਟ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਤੇ ਮੇਨਟੇਨ ਰੱਖਦੀ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਰੂਪ ਵੀ ਮੇਨਟੇਨ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਰੀਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਨਫਲਿਕਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨਾਲ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਉਸੀ ਮੋਲਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆਉਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਔਰ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਫਿਨਿਟੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ? क्या ये एक सर्वाइवल इंस्टिंक्ट है एक डरे दे बंदे दा कि मैं एक नवी जगह आया, अगर कल कोई पंगा होंदा तो जेडे मेरे अपने जे बंदे वही मेरी प्रोटेक्शन वास्ते आएंगे? डॉक्टर साहब मैं तुहानूं एक एग्जाम्पल दिंदा। रिसेंटली मेरे कोल एक पाकिस्तान दे एक एल्डरली लेडी आए, उन्होंने आके मैनू एक बड़ी दुखद लाइफ की स्टोरी सुनाई उन्हों दी। बड़ा इल ट्रीट किया गया उन्होंने, उन्होंने फैमिली की तरफ तो, उन्होंने हसबैंड इत्थे सीगे। आई थिंक कोई भी मेल मैंबर ऐसा नहीं सी उन्होंने फैमिली का जिसने उन्होंने नाल बदतमीजी ना किया होए और ईवन रेप ना किया होए। वो शक करते हैं कि उन्होंने हसबैंड नूं मारिया गया। जदों इत्थे आ गए उस तो बाद उन्होंने हसबैंड की जिन्नी सारी प्रॉपर्टी सीगी वो हड़प कर ली गई। वो मैनू आके कह रहे हैं कि मैं डरदी हाँ कि मेरे जेडे बच्चे ने अगर वो पाकिस्तान जाएंगे इन्हों मार दिता जाएगा। एंड एट द सेम टाइम वो मैनू ये कहते हैं कि जेड़ी इत्थे दी सोसाइटी सी, अमेरिकन सोसाइटी, इत्थे दे अमेरिकनस, दे वर वेरी नाइस टू हर, उन्होंने उसकी बड़ी हेल्प की है। वो मैनू ये भी कहती है कि जेड़े मेरे बच्चे न, क्योंकि इत्थे बॉर्न एंड रेज होए तो दे हैव टर्नड आउट टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट पीपल, वेरी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, उन्होंने वो चलाकियां नहीं आंदियां, दे हैव टर्नड आउट टू बी डिसेंट ह्यूमन बींग्स। बट शी वॉन्ट्स टू टेक देम टू पाकिस्तान कि अदरवाइज वो कल्चर किवें लर्न करांगे। आई वांट टू आस्क यू, मतलब वो क्या चीज़ उन्होंने सिखाना चाहती है, किस चीज़ की एफिनिटी है उन्होंने?
Well, she is right and she has a point to make. Again,
जी,
the idea is the continuity.
जी,
Create a community and the community continues across generations. If you're going to go across generations, you've got to transmit your practices, your habits, which become your traditions, which become sacred, as I illustrated to you earlier,
जी
how are you going to transmit them?
हम्म
Now, ideally, the transmission would be for each thing that you transmit,
हम्म
you create a certain atmosphere to understand it, to appreciate the history.
जी
In other words, to recognize that when things come to us from the past, the history made us what we are today,
हम्म
and it will determine what we will be tomorrow.
ओके
And that they are interlinks, they are linked yesterday, today, tomorrow,
जी
the future. And you got to connect them.
हम्म
Huh? Now, connection doesn't come just by insisting that this is sacred and you will bloody well bow your head 20 times a day to this. If you don't, I'll cut your head off.
जी
Huh? That's what religions do sometimes,
हम्म
and they have done that in history.
हम्म
That indicates our own frustration.
हम्म
We need to make them meaningful so they're comfortable with it.
जी
Huh? I may be, I would say I have to be at a stage where when I do something
हम्म
which is traditional, it connects me to the past.
हम्म
It shows me, in a sense, the future.
जी
I am at a point of, as T.S. Eliot said, at the intersection of time with the timeless.
हम्म
When I say timeless, I don't mean that it came from the heavens.
हम्म
I mean that it's time before me and after me. Huh?
जी
That's immortality, or whatever you want to call it. It's
Mhm.
beyond my sense.
हम्म
The intersection of time with the timeless.
जी.
It almost seems like something came out of a sacred textbook. Huh?
हम्म
But it's T.S. Eliot
जी
talking to you. And that's how I look at it. So when we mix traditions, some of them, practices sometimes, I say that we enrich them.
हम्म
When we mix musical instruments,
हम्म
we create an orchestra which speaks better,
हम्म
more richer than one instrument alone, richer than the finest violin, where even the triangle has a place, right? Or a pair of cymbals have a place.
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਔਰ ਕਲਚਰ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਟੀਨਿਊ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਰਦਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਆਰਗੂਮੈਂਟ ਔਰ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜੂਇਸ਼ ਪੀਪਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ 2000 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਕੱਢ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਦੇ ਸਪਰੈਡ ਆਲ ਓਵਰ ਦ ਵਰਲਡ ਬਟ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਗਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਰਿਲੀਜਨ ਆਪਣੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਅਲਾਈਵ ਰੱਖੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਸ ਅਲਾਈਵ ਰੱਖੇ
ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਗਏ
ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਗਏ
However, what
Ji.
it did was
Ji.
it increased their social capital. Because when they interacted with other religions and other thoughts,
जी
it's like when our food mixed with the what came from the Middle East
जी
and what came from perhaps Bombay or someplace, and we mixed it,
हम्म
we created a richer cuisine. We create a richer music, we create a richer tradition, not poorer, richer.
जी
So I value what we have,
जी
only then can I contribute. If I don't value, I have nothing to contribute.
जी 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 ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ
Yeah.
ਇਹ ਜਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਈਡੈਂਟੀਟੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਡੂ ਯੂ ਸੈਪਰੇਟ ਦ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਆਈਡੈਂਟੀਟੀ from the cultural identity?
Again, the issue is not quite so simple or easy,
जी
because when I look at identity, our cultural identity, the community identity,
जी
that's why I started with the community and beginning of the community,
जी
is tied with our history, with our politics as well.
Dr. Saab, let me put it this way.
You cannot separate the political identity from the culture,
जी
and you cannot separate the religious identity from the culture. And I'll give those examples, but go ahead.
Doctor, but my question is this. Let's say somebody sitting in Somalia or somebody sitting in some African country or anywhere
Doesn't matter.
converts to Sikhism. So does he need to become Punjabi as well? Or Bhangra bhi paye, pakode bhi khaye?
Absolutely not.
Hmm.
Absolutely not.
Hmm. So,
Tell me,
ji,
when Guru Nanak traveled all over the world,
ji.
did he say that you must do this to be a Sikh? No. And you will all be Punjabis? If that is the case, look at the Panj Pyare.
Ji.
How many Punjabis were in it? Uno, one. One.
Ji.
The thing, the first one.
Ji.
The other four were not.
Ji.
The hero that we remember every day.
Banda Singh Bahadur.
Banda Singh Bahadur.
Ji.
Which Punjab was he from?
Ji. Ji. Ji.
None.
Ji.
So we don't have to do that. We don't have to copy that. But what I'm saying is that beyond the cultural comfort zones that we have
Ji.
and value very much,
Ji.
there are practices that when we and traditions, that if we keep in mind the idea of connectivity,
Ji.
that they become universal values. And it's those universal values that we're talking about. Huh? When Guru Granth tells you
Ji.
that we all come from the same light,
Ji. 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 Ji.
right? And when all doesn't mean just you and I, but it means all, even the guys sitting in Mogadishu,
Exactly.
wherever part of
And Dr.
Africa you want to find.
The way the world is getting shaped now, there was a time when we had this European nation type, the German theories of blood and soil. The nations were formed on the basis of homogeneity of race or particular culture. Now, looking at countries like, particularly in the West, US, Canada, Australia. So all these cultures are coming together. They are adopting an identity, a political identity at least. So do you think that era of your cultural or racial identity being one with a nationhood is over?
Well, things are changing. They always were changing. I mean, look back, and I gave you the example of of the Gurus and the Panj Pyare and where they came from and all that, and his travels all over the place. Obviously, he was looking to a larger canvas, not just a Punjabi canvas.
Ji.
He wasn't thinking of that. Guru Nanak wasn't, no Guru was. Why should we limit ourselves? Because we are products of a community. We are. We always will be. And that is why when that glue becomes crazy glue, then we divide people into us and them. The first thing we do is us and them. Those people are, from God knows where, and they do crazy things. They don't even know Punjabi.
But Dr. Sahab, एक चीज़ we cannot deny that we have accepted this fact in the West. But in our countries back home, हाली ऐसी ये चीज़ एक्सेप्ट नहीं की थी. हाली भी अगर बिहार तो कोई बंदा आके पंजाब विच सरपंच बनता है तो एक बड़ी प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है सारे कि देखो जी साढ़े बारू बंदे आंदे पे और ये पोजीशंस लैंदे पे. वेयर एज असी आप इस चीज़ ਨੂੰ एडवोकेट भी करते हैं, इत्थे इस चीज़ वास्ते लड़ते भी हाँ और डिमांड करते हैं, उसे कहते हैं कि बड़ी होमोजेनियस दुनिया बन गई है.
Again, this is a human tendency.
जी.
Punjab is a small place.
जी.
And Bihar is a different state. The culture is different. The language is different. The religion is often different. And the people are poor. There's great poverty.
Ji.
Punjab is relatively progressive.
Ji.
And the people come to seek work.
Ji.
Like the Mexicans who want to come here to seek work.
Ji, ji,
and
ji,
our good president is so upset about it.
Ji.
I can understand people are upset again because they're looking at that tribal or community.
हाँ जी.
Because that's what we form.
Yeah.
However,
Ji.
we need to look beyond. Ultimately, our richness lies in the composites that we create.
जी. ਅਸੀਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨਾਲ ਇਨ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹਾਂਗੇ. ਅਸੀਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਰਹਿਣ. ਇਹ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹਨ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ. ਔਰ ਅਗਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਧਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਫੇਲੀਅਰ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ ਹਿਪੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੀ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਨਫਰੰਟ ਕਰੀਏ. ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ. ਐਂਡ ਵੀ ਹੋਪ ਟੂ ਸੀ ਯੂ ਅਗੇਨ ਇਨ ਦ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਸੂਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ. Thank you. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ The Way Forward.
Are we done? Or the